All right, everybody, welcome back, Red 13. And today we are going to be talking about some of the greatest teams in all sports histories. We got all four major: MLB, NHL, NBA, and of course the most popular, NFL. Where it's hard to phrase this. Are they really failures? Are they the greatest bust? You know, who the choke jobs, whatever you want to title it. It's hard to figure it out because these teams did some outstanding things that got to be praised, got to be recognized. Now, some people like myself, I'm a little more optimistic. In anything I've ever played, if I made a championship, you've heard in other comments and other videos I've made, I feel like if you make a championship, that's a success in some ways. But a lot are not like me. A lot of people, including a bunch of my friends, I mean, I don't care if it's fantasy football, and we had a guy who won the regular season title, the points title, made the championship, all this, and when he lost, he said it was a wasted season. It was a wasted season. And I was like, no, man, I was looking at the positive. No, you did this, it was great, it was great. And he's like, no, it was a wasted season. Because a lot of people, including NFL, NHL, all of them, their goal is always to win the league championship. If that is your goal, then losing it is a failure. Getting to it is a failure. Failing to make the playoffs is a failure. All of them, in the end, it comes out, there's only one who can win. So, as we go through it today, we're going to look at four of the best failures ever. You know, four of the greatest teams to ever go out there. And who is it that you feel in this? And we've actually put it up in a poll, and you can see right there, majority took, it was a big race between the Warriors and the Patriots. Let's share my thoughts on it because I'm all over in the place. The only team that didn't get any votes, and honestly to me, the one that would get off the hook is the Mariners, right? We'll deal with them. But first, let's start out with the NBA. The Golden State Warriors, the 2016 Warriors, they started out 24-0, breaking the Houston Rockets' 15-0 start. So they already come out. When you come out of the gates like that, I mean, honestly, who goes into a season saying, I'm going to make the all-time record? Of course, we'd all want that. But the goal is, like we said, always to win a championship. Anything else is sprinkled on top as extra. So to go out there and start out like that and then continue to go on. And the crazy part is they had Steve Kerr, who got Coach of the Year, deservedly so, but 39-4. Luke Walton, remember that? Luke Walton was 39-4 to start that year out. And you're like, at that point, when you get to that, that's when it becomes, when you get to the halfway point and you are single-digit losses, and I'm talking like 5, 6, or less, like they were at 39-4 to that point, you do start to think, could we actually eclipse the great 95-96 Chicago Bulls, 72-10. Honestly thought no one would ever get that. To get it to that point, and if we look at the team, I still got to do a video on that. How did they lose 10 games, that roster, that team, the greatness of that Bulls team? How did they lose 10 games? I will definitely get to that. That's one I want to touch because I forgot. I don't remember all the teams they lost to, but I would die to find out and go over that again. So stay tuned for that. But back to the Warriors. You had the league MVP in Steph Curry, deservedly so. They never had back-to-back, right? The first time in league history where a team might have had back-to-back, they never had back-to-back losses. They had a league best, I believe, 54 wins, beating home wins, 54 straight home wins, carrying over from the year before, beating the Chicago Bulls 95-96. I think they had 44. So they shattered so many different records, and it was just insane to see. And no, I'm not going to get into debate. Were they better than this? The greatest team? They can never be considered the greatest because they didn't win the championship. You got to finish it. But that's all off the table. It's regardless. They could have went, even if they went 80-2, this NBA era is different than this NBA era. So let's just give it to them. They were the best regular season team in this era that they're in. But back to it. So to do all those things, Steph Curry not only got league MVP, he's the first unanimous league MVP ever. That's incredibly impressive. So with that team getting to the playoffs, the first two rounds they blow through it. The first two rounds they're 8-2, and then they get to the OKC Thunder. Remember Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant, and they were up 3-1. The OKC, they had it. I remember watching it when they were up 3-1. I'm just sitting there in the highlights, and they're interviewing Westbrook and Durant, and I'm just like, I can't believe the Warriors are going to lose this. I cannot believe that they're not going to at least even get to the finals. And I didn't feel OKC was better. But you were just like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. A hot team, getting hot at the right time, whatever the case may be, matchup problems, right? The Lakers this year in the playoffs, they weren't the top 4 team, but they still had better matchups. Or people get hurt and everything falls into place. But the Warriors down 3-1. and I did not think they would come back, and they did. You got to give them credit for that. Not that they're champions. Not that I know sometimes, like you said, one team at the end is the winner, and that's it. Everyone else is considered a failure, especially diehard fans. There is no, we made the playoffs. They don't look for bright spots. It's win it or you suck. And the Warriors down 3-1 came back. That was the heart of a champion. That was true determination. And KD, obviously, we know what happened the next year. He said, hey, can't beat him, join him. But in the finals, up 3-1 and not losing multiple games in a row, and 3-game losing streak ever all season, I was 100% saying it was done. I think the rest of the NBA was saying it was done. I know Draymond Green got suspended. I think it was for Game 5. And then the Cavs won, and then they made it a series, and we know what happened. They blew that lead. Was it a choke job, or did the Cavs steal it away? Watching it at the time, I felt like it was such a back and forth thing that I felt like the Warriors did what they could do to win, but the Cavs just kicked it into another gear. Maybe mentally they just turned it on, everything started clicking, and they got hot. But you still got to feel 73-9. You're the best team ever in the regular season at this point. The unanimous league MVP, first ever. Not even Jordan did that. Not Kareem Abdul. Nobody's ever done that. And then to lose a 3-1 lead and do something you hadn't done all year, lose 3 in a row. I guess it's on the verge of choke job. But that is the winner of our poll. And for me, I'm so back and forth on that. Did they really? Because it's like, as you look at it, you go, as we look at the other teams, especially when we get to the NHL, as we look at the greatest losers, the greatest failures, I would probably say, you would have to put them up there. Wouldn't they win? Whether you say choke job or not, they were the greatest team to ever fail. And that's kind of the title of the episode, the show here. It's just tough. So the Warriors, put a pin in that. Let's put them at the top of the list right now. Fans voted that it is them. Now let's get to the next team, and that is the New England Patriots. 18-0. 18-0 going to that Super Bowl. They just beat the Giants. Let's go over it. Everything with the Patriots, everything went their way. Even games they possibly should not have won, they did win. And I'm going to say right now, the Sunday night game, if you remember, comment, they played the Ravens. The Ravens were, I think they had 5-6 wins. The Ravens were a shell of what they were, but they still had Ray Lewis. They still had Ed Reed. You still had their coach. You had a Super Bowl, a team that had won multiple Super Bowls, and you're like, okay, this was the rivalry at the time, the Red Wings Avalanche classic rivalry, where the records were thrown out. The Patriots were like 11 or 12-0, and this was Sunday night primetime. And the Ravens came all the way down, and on fourth down, the Patriots had to get it or it's over, and the Ravens win it. And as they hike it, the Ravens stop them, and they're celebrating. You see Ray Lewis, Ed Reed celebrating, and then you see on the sideline the coach for the Ravens had called timeout. And it's like Bellick had called timeout, and the players were furious. Because it didn't affect the play. The Patriots didn't know. They went on. You couldn't even hear it really live, and you had no clue. So everyone's celebrating, and New England gets another chance. And the last thing you could do is give Tom Brady another chance. They ended up coming back, winning that game, and the rest is history. They made 16-0, won both their playoff games, beating the Chargers in the AFC Championship, and making it against a Giants team that, remember, it was a shootout. 35-31, something around that line, where the Giants, the last game of the season, I was expecting something similar to that. I thought it was going to be like a 28-24, but I still felt New England was going to win. They had everything. You had Tom Brady, who got his first ever league MVP. He finally showed, and this is in a previous video where I said I was wrong about Brady. This is what really showed it for me was I always put him as that system quarterback. He had Randy Moss. He finally had a real weapon. 23 touchdowns. That's crazy. Randy Moss, 23 touchdowns. You had Asante Samuel. They had, I think, 8 Pro Bowlers, and they had like 8 or 9 All-Pro players. Tom Brady, league MVP, 50 touchdowns at the time. I think Manning ended up breaking it later. But at the time, NFL record, and Moss, 23 of them, almost half of them. So with that, in that Super Bowl, they should have had that. We know what happens. We know the David Tyree catch. Honestly, the Giants had Manning to where if they just held him another second, even if they don't pull him down, the NFL rule is grasp and control. Once you stop him, the progress stop, the rest might have blown the whistle, and that's game. And now we're looking at a 19-0 team. But unfortunately, they failed, and on Twitter when I put this up, the Patriots barely won. They won the poll for being the greatest team at blowing it, at choking it, the worst playoff performance once it mattered the most. And I don't agree with that. I agree maybe you could put them up there with the Warriors, right? Because we're looking at teams that dominated and were previous champions and were kind of in the dynasty mode. And when you come out and put on a demonstration and like they did, these teams, and then you fail at the last second, whether it be in basketball and football, it still is. They lost 17-14 in a very close game. All Brady's Super Bowls were close games. But when you lose it like that, football and baseball are two of the ultimate team games. They all are. They're all team games. But I give a little less slack on the NBA because Curry can go out and play the whole game. You know, Tom Brady can't go out and play defense. Randy Moss can't go be a corner or a linebacker. You have to rely on parts of the game, and it's part of it. But I give football and baseball a little more slack when it comes to that. So I don't want to, for me personally, I don't put the Patriots there. I think maybe they succumb to the pressure in the end. Maybe had they been 15-1 like the Niners, right, who did 15-1 and won the Super Bowl. The Bears 15-1 and won the Super Bowl. But then you got the Vikings who were 15-1, or the Steelers 15-1. Both of them failed. So even that extra loss, it's 50-50. You could say, hey, I relieved the pressure. You could say, hey, it didn't matter. They still lost in the conference finals. So with that is it on New England. I would put Golden State ahead of them just in the fact that it was NBA 3-game-to-1 lead. The Patriots is still 1 game. I bet you if they played 4 out of 7, 4 weeks in a row, the Patriots probably win every other game other than that one. And that's what's crazy about football. That's why I kind of give Patriots a little bit of less slack on, or a little more slack on that. So let's get to the next team. One more quick fact on New England Patriots. Do you know the NFL Films actually lists that Patriots team as the 7th best team in NFL history? So in this one, at least, hey, they didn't win the championship, but people still recognize them as one of the greatest teams ever, at least NFL Films. And it's hard to argue with it. You know, losing in a Super Bowl, being 18-1, how many teams can you put? You can't just put any Super Bowl champion above them. Eras, different times, and dang, they were good. If you look at that roster, they were freaking all-stars. And yeah, just a tough loss. Just a quick note I wanted to put on New England. All right, next, let's get to baseball. The Seattle Mariners. Now, 116 wins. What were they? 116-46. That's what it was. I should do math. 116-46. And in that year, they had, they broke the American League record for the most wins ever in one season. And they tied the 1906 Chicago Cubs. That's a freaking long time to wait for another team to get 116 wins. But the Mariners, with that, the biggest reason, we'll get to in a second why they did that, but they were so hot. They were such the talk of the baseball world and sports world because of one player who came out of nowhere and just dominated the league and showed, hey, this guy should have been here for many years, kind of like Shohei Ohtani. But with the Mariners, they had 58 or 59 games where they won by 4 or more runs. That is still an MLB record. So they weren't winning games, 2-1, 6-5, where it was all close. I mean, they did, but 59 of their 112 wins, almost nearly basically half, were 4 or more runs. That's dominance. They really kicked butt. Now, with that, they had Coach of the Year in Lou Piniella. I believe they had 8 All-Stars, and I want to say possibly maybe 9 All-Stars. They had a lot of players that year represent their team, deservedly so. Manager of the Year, deservedly so. He should have got it, Lou Piniella. And finally, you had the AL Rookie of the Year. You had the League MVP. You had the American League Batting Champion. That's insane. And then you throw in stolen bases. Led the American League in stolen bases. He might have led the whole league. I can't remember. But all those, one guy, and that is Ichiro. Ichiro dominated the league. He came out of nowhere. We knew he was great in the Japanese league. And to come over here and just take the league by storm. Still, probably the greatest Japanese player of all time. Ohtani still loves him to death. World Series Classic champion, and everything he did that year for the Mariners. It was fun, man. And as an Angel fan who's a rival to them, it was still fun to see that. And it's exciting when there's a story like that in baseball. It keeps it where it's like, it's something interesting outside of just your team, whether they do well or not. It's, wow, what is this? Every night you wanted to see, could they do it? And as they had these incredible hot starts and kept going, you're like, dude, are these guys really for real? So they make the playoffs. They are down 2-1 in the ALDS to the Cleveland Indians. When they were down 2-1, I still felt they could come back, right? It's 3 out of 5. I didn't count it over like I did when we were talking previously with the Warriors when they were down 3-1 to OKC. I was like, they could still come back. It's baseball. Pitching, Ichiro, you could do it. And they did. They won the next 2 games, the Game 4 in Cleveland, and then returned to Seattle and won Game 5, and made it to the next round, to the however you want to call it, ALCS, American League Championship Series. And they took on the Yankees, who went on to win the World Series. I believe the Yankees won that year. But they lost 4 games to 1. So you sit there. Do you really fault them? Do you really look at that and say, hey, man, you got 116 games, 116 wins? We've seen 100, the Oakland A's, when they had the Bash Brothers, I think 2 out of 3 years had 100 wins. And I don't even know if they won the World Series those years. The one they won against the Giants, I thought they were in the 90s. So we've seen 100-win teams, which is awesome. I love seeing triple-digit teams in baseball get the wins. When they get that and then they fail, baseball, Ichiro, think about it. Anybody out there, let's say you're on a team, you can go 4 for 4 with 4 home runs and still lose that game 5-4. I mean, you could do everything you can. That, to me, is the ultimate team game. And when you go against a team that had been previously dominant, the Yankees, or they were in the process of the dynasty, the great Yankees with Jeter and all those guys, Pettit. I can't remember if Clemens was there that year. Either way, we know all the great players they had, Mariano Rivera. So with those teams, I cut the Mariners slack. For one, it's the crazy team game. 2, great pitching can beat you. And 3, they lost some close games like 4-2, 4-2. Then they blew out. Their only win was a blowout, and then Game 5 they got blown out. But as you look at it and you go 4 games to 1, man, you didn't even show up. They did. Every game other than 2 were close. And at the end, Seattle had 22 runs scored. The Yankees had 24. So it wasn't even a huge margin. They were much closer than it looked. So with the book closed on the Mariners, still to this day, it's a team I think about all the time. They didn't need to win the championship. I think, yes, they did fail at winning the championship. So the point goes back to the beginning. They are one of the greatest failures of all time, but no one voted almost on any poll I asked for the Mariners. And I think a lot of sports fans are knowledgeable knowing, hey, you know what? You can have a 90-win team come in and win the World Series, even if the other team had 100. When you play 162 games, give or take, you're going to get a lot of losses here and there that are very close. In the end, the better team proves itself out, and the Yankees were the better team, regardless if the Mariners did break those records and have Ichiro, who just took the league by storm. Memorable season, we'll never forget it. All right, let's get to our last one, and probably the one of the ones that I feel is pulling me towards this more than the Warriors. All right, probably the least popular sport, the NHL. Now, it's one of my favorite. Huge Ducks fan. Have been a hockey fan before the Ducks even moved to Anaheim since I was 12 years old. Genesis. Anyone ever play NHL in Genesis? That's what got me into it. That's what taught me the rules. Anyways, since then, I've been a huge diehard hockey fan. I used to be able to name the starting 5 for every team in the league. After a while, you got other things in life, you move on. With NHL this year, the Boston Bruins set multiple records. They had a roster that had multiple players with 30 or more goals. The offense was crazy. The goaltending was solid. The defense was great. As a team, they were just, wow. Almost like that Mariners, but like dominant. They finished with an NHL record, 65 wins. I believe the old one was 63. Beating it the last 2 games where they needed it. 65 wins in an 82-game season. That's unheard of. That's so amazing. 135 points. In hockey, if you don't know, every win you get 2 points. 135 points. Wow. That's another NHL record. So it was going into the playoffs, you were like, dude, we got to make the finals. You got to make the finals. When you look at that situation, right? The Warriors, you got to make the finals. They did. The Patriots, you got to make the Super Bowl. They did. The Mariners, you just got to show up, and even if you lose, be respectful. They won their opening round. They did not fall in that round, and they lost to a great dynasty Yankee team. So you see what I'm saying? With the Bruins, you got 4 rounds. I'll be damned, you don't get out of that first round. And they failed to get out of the first round. You had a Panthers team, and now we've seen this in all sports, which I absolutely love, is where the team that's got, remember the 06, look up the 06 Rockies, where they were they won 15 of their last 16 games to get that wild card. While the team ahead of them, I think it was Arizona. Arizona was a big lead, and they had it. They were going to win that division, make the playoffs, and you're almost not that they are, but you're kind of in cruise control. Hey, just keep doing what we're doing. Keep doing what we're doing. We'll get to the dance. We'll get there. And then they made it. And I remember the Rockies played 14 straight wins and caught up to them. And the division came down to the second to the last game, and the Diamondbacks won it going heads up. I love that and they won. And the Rockies won the last game to make the playoffs. Well, who got hot? Who swept through the NLDS? Who swept through the NLCS? The Rockies did. They made the finals and then had like a 12-day wait period, and they cooled off and lost to the Red Sox, got swept in the World Series. But man, those are the examples where you see these teams fighting just to get in. And when the playoffs start, they are in killer playoff mode. And nobody was more hyped and ready for that than the Panthers, who were basically on the edge of missing the playoffs and fought and scratched and fought and scratched and made that last playoff spot. While the Bruins were sitting up there, they're on vacation almost. They're still trying to get the wins. They're trying to break the record. They're still playing. It's not like they just sat back and lost a bunch. But it's different when you already flipped the playoff mode 3 weeks to a month before just to get in, while the other team is so concerned with getting these records. And they got the 4th ever President's Trophy for their team history. So that's a big thing. Now, they did not come out of the gates bad. They actually got up to a 3-1 lead. And when it was 3-1, I was thinking it was going to be a sweep. But when it was 3-1, I'm like, it's over. Bruins will get it. They'll get to the next round, do what they need to do. Toronto would be a good one. Now, Toronto, the funny thing is, Toronto was 15 less wins. They were second place. You got the Bruins, the Maple Leafs right behind them. They were 15 less wins. You're like, dude, that is a huge gap, right? You don't see numbers like that except for video games. And then you throw in the Panthers, who barely got in, 23 less wins. That's a quarter of the NHL season. So basically, they had a quarter of the NHL season in wins ahead of the Panthers. They had no business. I don't even know what the odds were in Vegas on this, but they had no business winning this. And when it was 3-1, just like the Thunder we mentioned earlier, just like the Warriors we mentioned earlier, you have to finish. Game 5 in overtime in Boston. And the Panthers came out and won it. Kachuk got the game winner. They ended up making it 3-2. And at that point, you're like, all right, 3-2. You should have won it. You had the overtime. You had a last-second chance. You didn't get it. You go to OT, you lose. Okay, they snuck one away. They snuck one. Let's go to Florida. Florida beats them again. And I want to say that one was like it was like a butt whooping, I think. I thought that. So now the pressure is on Boston, right? You went from 65 wins, league record, and just dominating the league to where now you are a game away of getting eliminated from the playoffs and not even getting out of the first round. And Game 7, overtime, and the Panthers win. If you did not watch it or follow anything in the hockey, you missed a great series. My kids, they like the Ducks. They're not even diehard. They watched the last 3 games with me. I didn't see the first 4. But once the Panthers, I got to see this. I got to see if they can come back. And we stayed up and watched those overtime games, and they were just as excited as I was. And I pulled for those Panthers, and they made it. The Panthers eventually went to the finals, lost to Vegas. Congratulations, Vegas. But anyway, back to this. How does Boston dominate and then blow a 3-1 lead and not be considered possibly the greatest failure of all time? They are the NHL's greatest team ever in the regular season. Every team we've talked about was the greatest in the regular season. But the difference is every other team won a playoff series or made it to the finals. The greatest choke job, you got to say maybe the Warriors, because they made the finals, right? They made the championship. So you give them a slack. They got a Western Conference championship. They got a banner to hang. They got something from it, as well as regular season. So they got something from it. So it's hard for me to say Warriors, they did blow a 3-1 lead, 1 game away from winning the championship when they should have. But Boston, how could you cut it's so hard for me to cut the Bruins, even if you don't watch hockey. It's the same thing in all sports. It's the same premise. Reverse it. Let's say the Bruins made the Cup final and lost to the Vegas. What would you say if I told you that 73 Warrior team lost in the first round? Let's say, I don't know who they played that year. Let's say they played the Clippers or the Spurs, the 8th seed, and they blew a 3-1 lead and lost in the first round. Would the Warriors be your number 1? Now, Warriors are number 1 already, right? Voted probably because they blew the 3-1 lead in the championship. But after hearing all this, Did I persuade you? Do you start to feel, hey, maybe Boston is the greatest failure? They are the greatest team ever, and they failed worse than anyone else on this list. So that's it. Those are the teams that are some of the most respected and greatest teams ever, especially the Patriots, NFL Films, top 7 of all time. The other teams, they all had letdowns, right? They all choked 3 games, other than the Mariners, but they choked 3 games to 1 leads. The Patriots blew the Super Bowl. Tell me, comment, fix me. If I'm wrong on any facts, fix me. If you think I'm way off based on something, fix it. Let's comment. Let's get a discussion. I love it. I am more than open. And hey, hearing a good point, maybe I'm wrong. I will always admit it, as you've seen in the comments with our other videos. So like, subscribe. Let's stay tuned for more videos. And I got to do that Chicago Bulls where they only had 9 losses. I got to find out the 10 losses, who they were. It's driving me nuts. Talk to you guys later. Peace.